Hey, I'm happy to introduce everyone today to Dr. Sarah Hudson. She's a civic strategist, writer, and CEO, editor-in-chief at Nonprofit Quarterly. Formerly, you were at Nola Reddy and St. Jude and Beck Center, and you were a Berggruen Fellow.
Yes.
Um, I'm thrilled to speak with Sarah because we recently connected, and I realized that her background is perfect for the plus media thesis because she's a storyteller and a systems thinker. She's really interested in moving people to action, not just informing them. So, jumping in with a quick conversation with Sarah today, and let's look at the awareness to action gap. I just came off of a conference where we talked a lot about that. So, tell us about Nola Reddy and how you weren't just sharing information, you were going much further.
Sure. So first, thanks. It's such a delight to be here. And I thought that I was going to have a very different path. I had always been interested in whose stories get told and whose stories don't, and how does that shape not just our understanding of histories and past, but also of present conditions and what is possible in the future, and particularly around power dynamics. And so I was finishing a PhD looking at the voices of Creoles of color and immigrant women, particularly from Latin America, in New Orleans and moving into the global South, and how that shifts our understanding of power dynamics in quote unquote US histories. Um, so I was on a like I'm gonna go be a librarian, but it was post Katrina New Orleans, and the city of New Orleans said, "Will you join us as our first community outreach officer in the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness?" And that led me to taking the question of whose stories get told and whose voices get heard, and how do we build systems for them, and not just ask it theoretically, which was always something I knew I didn't want to just be theoretical about it, but ask it practically. And so I ended up building what's still to this day called NOLA Ready, which is it's ready.nola.gov. It's the city of New Orleans' first and still only centralized emergency information, communications, storytelling systems for before, during, and after emergencies, because Katrina was 2005. You think about Twitter, Facebook coming in kind of in the 2010s. Um,
Right.
but at that point, the city didn't have a strategy of communicate at volume during emergencies. There was no central crisis communication source of truth and information. And we all know during an emergency, both before, but particularly during and after, rumors fly, and it leads to public endangerment. So it was my first foray into what then became my lifetime of how do we build civic infrastructure around narrative story, narrative power building that then builds civic infrastructure that supports greater equality for all communities.
I love that. I mean, for several reasons, because at Plus Media, we think of ourselves as an infrastructure for engagement and measurement. But let's talk a little bit about the story and the infrastructure and how they need to work together, because at least we feel that you need to have both. I mean, the story is the flame for the fire, but without the infrastructure, it's very difficult to have the story have the impact that you really want to have.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually take an example. We're talking today, it's June 30th. We're coming up on July 4th. And of course, that is a general national celebration, so to speak, of American democracy. We're going to put very big air quotes. But this is the 250th anniversary. And one of the things that I have been talking to folks about who believe in the need to invest in democracy and invest in infrastructure, but don't understand the relation that narrative has, is I actually walk them through the history of that democracy today is being eroded by a rigorous conservative narrative strategy that was not just strategy, it was strategy built into infrastructure. It was a deliberate seeding of narratives to enable legal wins and create policy changes and create political power consolidation. And then when you think about that, so when I go back and I talk about infrastructure, it's okay. Folks started getting worried about narratives way back, in the 1970s. We had the Powell memo. It said we have to fund a conservative narrative infrastructure. We then went, for the rest of the 1970s, that was the creation of the think tank movement. That's where we got Cato Institute, we got Heritage Foundation, Manhattan Institute, but it was also I think it was $100 million a year commitment that was made to launch these narrative infrastructure, narrative storytelling, but built on civic infrastructure that to
Right.
this day have led to things like the overturn of Roe versus Wade.
I mean,
Again,
you can't deny the power
yeah,
of that.
20 years later, Fox News launches. It becomes, it by 2000, I think it was launched in 96, and by 2002, it was the most watched cable news. And then you fast forward another 20 years, and you're looking at what is called the pink slime news networks, but the ones that we would know, Breitbart, PragerU, Federalist, but there's 1,400 as we have news deserts increasing. They're filling them in with another form of narrative infrastructure, which is the combination of we have themes, messages, lies, propaganda that we want to put out there to persuade, and we're going to build infrastructure to make it possible. You can't only have the narrative and you can't only have the infrastructure. They have to work together, and that has the power to both make and break our democracy as we are living in real time right now.
Absolutely, and that speaks so much to where Plus Media has come from, and that is if you have the infrastructure to support these really positive narratives for democracy, for social good, for environmental good, we believe that we can scale engagement and activity around those important positive themes that and challenges that we're facing and to prove it. Because one of the things that I keep hearing are the reliance on performative metrics. And I think that with a story, we need to know who's engaging, why are they engaging, what are they thinking and feeling and doing once they get that story. That is when I say performative metrics, we're mostly talking about impressions and views.
Mm.
um, so I'm curious, you at NPQ are telling so many stories. How are you looking at proving it? The documented action that happens around these great narratives.
Yeah, so this is an interesting, this is one of the reasons that you and I are so soul and gold aligned. MPQ has an interesting mission. It is dedicated to advancing both conversation and practice in nonprofits, philanthropies, and movements dedicated to a multiracial democracy, embedded in all of the things that we all care about. I won't give the whole spiel, but that important piece is conversation and practice. So when we're looking at, we don't, what funders would call metrics for success, we're looking at not just did somebody read it, but did they take an action? So when we follow up with folks, we're gathering information about are you a funder who shared it with, like a program officer who shared it with a board member? Are you a funder who shared it to another funder? Are you a movement person who reposted it to a different platform of people? Are you somebody who made a donation to an organization because you read about the work that they were doing and you wanted to support it? So we're looking, are you somebody who took it, read it, and then repopulated it, reprinted it in your own newsroom or went online and did a video? Did you switch mediums and then also switch audiences? Did you take an action? Did you make a change in your organizational practice, in your institutional practice, did you reach out to get a new partner? Like those are the things when we're thinking about the ways that stories can bring us together. It's that network weaving impact, but we are really and it we are both looking for it for the stories that go out in the world, but the other piece is that we ask that of the folks who are contributing. So MPQ is unique in that our team is not made up of journalists. I would say 95% of the contributions that we get come from the field. They come from people with lived experience and expertise. They may have never published something in a media, or they may be publishing all the time in something that, the New York Times wouldn't consider media because it's YouTube or, it's something else. We don't care about that. We care about the expertise. But we ask folks, we don't want to just have them report the what of what is happening. We want them to tell us the so what of why does it matter, and then now what of what's the thing we need to do, the action we need to take, something that makes people walk away thinking, doing, feeling, sharing something differently than when they started that piece. And so for us, that metric for success goes into the creation of the article and then into the distribution of the article or whatever it is, article art, etc.
That is one of the reasons why I am just want to champion NPQ and your work, because
Thank
that
you.
so what question is exactly why I started Plus Media. And one of the things that I love about your work is that you are sharing stories that most people are missing. And we like to say, find them, move them, prove it. That's
Right.
exactly what you're doing. And you have to reach them first,
Yeah.
and you're doing that in a really clever way. And I think that a lot of the folks that we work with today would love to hear about, how do you do that? How do you reach the people that maybe are missing these stories?
It's funny you say this. I am currently covering our social media, and one of the pieces that I put out today was written by somebody who's incarcerated in Georgia and has been for 35 years. And they found the We the Civic call for stories of real stories of multiracial nonprofits, philanthropy, movement folks doing the hard work of democracy day in and day out. We issued a special call for pitches. They responded from prison and they submitted an incredible piece on the prison system in Georgia, like the history of the prison system in Georgia and what we can learn about it and how we need to advance it, like over the last 250 years, looking ahead to the next 250. And I just thought to myself, how did this
Wow.
what was the chain? But I do think that part of what happens is we're not, having worked as a journalist, there's very specific, particularly in the Twitter era, there's very specific like journalist listservs, freelancers, etc. Because our contributors are also our readers, and we're also, they're funders, readers, they're folks doing the work. It our calls tend to go out in a lot of places that they might not usually. So it'll go on the solidarity economy listserv of like, hey, MPQ is looking for democracy, folks. That might not, but it will also go on like the indigenous lands back, listserv, and it will go out on RADCOM's Radical Communications Network. So we're very embracing of different kinds of storytelling and also really, really upfront that you don't come in with a pedigree. You come in and your power is derived from the story. You have a story to tell, you have expertise to share, you have thought leadership to share. And so I think the barrier is also lower. Or not lower, the quality barrier is not lower, but the that really open invitation to say, like, we're here for you. We're here to tell you, like, our job is to platform and your ideas, regardless of, where you went to school or what your job title is or anything like that.
Right. Oh, I love that. Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. Can't wait to hear more about MPQ.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.